There are many myths about war, and World War II was no exception. People's perception of the Germans was based on the atrocities that were committed by the Nazi Party. The Germans are always portrayed as evil, unfeeling in movies, TV, and video games. But not all Germans were evil. Let's take a glimpse at the past through the eyes of a German. Contrary to popular belief, many German soldiers were not in support of the Nazi beliefs. Only 10% of all Germans were considered Nazis. The German soldiers had no political ties. They were called the Wehrmacht. They fought out of duty to protect their country or in fear of being killed or having their families be subjected to repercussions if they did not obey orders. All children had to join the Hitler Youth. A German veteran, Walter Warda, who was held as a prisoner of war in the Soviet. He talks of not wanting to be a soldier. Warda, who is 92, was captured by the Soviets in 1944 and held in a POW camp or gulags until released in 1950.
Churchill, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and Stalin and Hitler. They were five of the biggest murderers in history, each one. I have no use for any of them. They were no good. They didn't care who died. And altogether, 72 million people died on their conscience. Nothing good. I would shoot the son of right when I can get. And nobody really likes to be a soldier. I couldn't be mad. They would shoot me. I couldn't do anything. I have to be happy in a camp. We had to do some day sport and jumping over a buck that high. And I'm little, but I made it. And the guy before me, he broke his arm and the bone was sticking out here. So I didn't like that.
Warda explains his father, who was a foreman at Thyssen. They did work for railroads. He lost one eye in the First World War. He was one of the first in the Nazi Party, but after a year or two he left. Warda heard his dad say to his mom, "They're crooked." When you went in a store, you had to say, "Heil Hitler," and he hated it. People reminded him, "Oh, I forgot," was his response. He was always against the system. He hated to be bossed around. He was drafted in 1943 on Hitler's birthday and said, "I didn't want to go to war."
That I made it out of the mess in Russia and Romania and Bulgaria. Without his help, I couldn't do it. There were situations you couldn't believe it. I think it's God. He was very good to me. He protected me in every situation. I had the feeling he was helping me all the time.
Did anything good come from his experience that made him a better person or helped him later in life? Warda replied, "No, I tell you, I didn't learn anything, only learned how to survive." Not only were German soldiers viewed as monsters, but German citizens were too. They endured prejudice from what the world viewed as an entire country of Nazis. Barbara Welch was a child during the Eastern Front and takeover of Berlin by the Russians. This was referred to in history as the Rape of Berlin.
I was born in 1938 in Berlin, which was the capital of
Germany. And now, since the wall fell, again, it's the capital of Germany. When the war started in about 43, all women, children, and old people were asked to leave the city of Berlin because it was getting bombed. And my mother's parents were living in the eastern part, Sachsen, in Leipzig. So my mother, my sister, and I went to stay with my grandparents. Then we all had to leave that city, and we were taken out into the country, and the farmers had to take us city slickers in. So my mother, my sister, and I lived with one farmer. My grandparents lived on the other farm. And that's where I was when the Russians came. Well, then when we lived out there in the country, first the Germans came back from the Eastern Front, and the Russians followed. And my mother's best friend was living with a farmer who had two daughters that were like 14 and 17. And of course, this man wanted to protect his girls from the Russians raping them. So my mother's best friend lived there on that farm, and every time the Russians would come to the farm, the farmers would tell them that a woman was upstairs. So my aunt was raped 27 times by the Russians. My dad was a prisoner of war, but he was taken prisoner of war by the British. He was in Greece, and he had gotten wounded on his heel. I guess, I don't know, maybe his boots were too tight or something, and they rubbed against his heel. So he was on a hospital ship, which was captured by the Brits, and he was taken prisoner of war, and he was in the Red Sea in Egypt for 7 years.
So the perspectives we saw today were from everyday German citizens who cared about their country. They were not Nazis that propaganda portrays them as. The Wehrmacht or the German army were given blinded instructions that they were made to follow without question, and we were given a glimpse of the harrowing experiences these everyday people went through. Like most had many beliefs that the German armies and the people were calculated killers, set on destroying everyone and everything. But as we have seen today, they were just people like you and I. They had a future ahead of them. They had families, jobs, and many of them gave up all of that to serve or support their country.